Howdy. I'm not here right now. Larkin Rose here, sort of here. When I'm recording this, I'm here, but when you're seeing this, I'm not here. This video will post tomorrow, Friday, which is now today because you're watching it. I'm not really here today when you're watching this. I'm on a plane on my way to Pennsylvania for a screening of the Jones Plantation in Oaks, Pennsylvania, which is a little bit west of Philadelphia, for a screening there, and then we'll have a Q&A afterwards, and then I think we're all going to a nearby like bar or hangout or something to hang around and chat for as long as we chat. Movie starts at 6:30, and then I think it's like a half hour of Q&A afterwards, so that the night will still be young because the movie's not that long. But I wanted to talk about an issue that's actually, again, relevant to the movie, Jones Plantation. So, oh, by the way, the description of this video will give you the link for more information about tomorrow night's screening and where to go and where to get tickets and all that fun stuff. I wanted to talk about the process that most people go through when they start to question things. And the thing is, most of us know this from personal experience, but it's sort of easy to forget it when you're in the process of talking to somebody. So if you've been into the philosophical thing and voluntarism and 8 million related topics and ideas, it's understandable and it's natural that you have 80 gazillion things you find interesting and important and profound and stuff that you want to bombard the rest of the world with. You want to grab some random stranger or somebody you know and say, sit down so I can lecture you for 5 hours on all the cool things I've found and I've become interested in and I believe in. And that works exactly never. But it's important to notice what actually does work. And I base this on my own story, but also hearing the stories of hundreds and hundreds of other people who are now voluntarists. There is usually some little thing that triggers their brain starting to doubt stuff. And it's different for different people. I know people who say, oh yeah, my journey started with like looking into 9/11, or my journey started with learning how the currency system works and the Federal Reserve and all that, or looking into this conspiracy or that conspiracy, or learning from the tax thing, the legal side of it that I talked about many years ago. There's lots of different things that make people go, hey, what's actually going on here? And it's important to note that psychologically, you don't have to explain to somebody everything that you care about and everything that you've learned. Now, if they get to the point where they're actually interested and they're going, whoa, yeah, tell me more, then by all means, babble till you're blue in the face, go for it. Because then if they're actually paying attention and listening and they want to hear it, might do some good. But the reason this video is called The First Step is because even most voluntarists underestimate how important that first little thing that triggers a thought in somebody's head, how important that is. And it is monumentally important. And I've learned that with a bunch of silly little videos I've made, and I've had people tell me, yeah, that I'm allowed to rob you video from 1 billion years ago, that started me thinking about things. Because the thing is, you don't have to drag somebody to all the way where you are, assuming you like know a whole bunch about these stuff and like to philosophize and ponder things like that. You don't have to drag them all the way there. Sometimes you have to drag them a little bit or coax them or nudge them or whatever to take that first step. But when somebody gets interested, not only do you not have to drag them, most of the time you couldn't stop them if you tried. And you probably have your own story. I have my own story. And if you know other voluntarists, you've probably heard plenty of other people's stories too. And they often start in different places. Like, oh, I read this book by Frederick Bastiat, like The Law by Frederick Bastiat, or I heard a Ron Paul speech. A lot of people started that way and started to question things and think about principles. You can't make somebody care about something they don't care about. but you can sort of put the bait in front of them. Like, here's some cheese. If you want to sniff the cheese like a good little mouse and be interested, then they're the ones who are going to decide to take the journey. Now, it doesn't mean you can't do anything. It doesn't mean sit on your butt and twiddle your thumbs and hope the rest of the world comes around, because there's lots of things you can do to try to entice them into taking that first step, to try to catch their interest in something they care about. And there's things like, there's false flag stuff, there's the warmongering stuff that a lot of people who are into history and learn about wars and realize, wow, this wasn't really as simple as it was broadcast. It wasn't, there were really bad people over there, but then the righteous United States came in and saved the day. Like, no, there's always 18 layers beneath that. And in exactly 0 cases did any government ever do anything because it was the right thing to do. Like, sometimes they sort of accidentally were fighting against even worse people, but it was never because the people in power have any principles or scruples. It was just because they saw a way to serve their own interests by playing the game of war, the game of politics, or any of the other psychotic stuff they do. So a lot of people, different things will catch their interest and make them start thinking about stuff. Now, sometimes it can be some stupid little 5-minute long video that, like, I have my video called The Tiny Dot, and a huge number of people, like, to me, an amazing number of people, because that thing is just this stupid, simple little animation. But a pretty huge number of people have told me, yeah, that started me on my journey. And I was like, that dumb thing? The thing is, as much as we as voluntarists may want to, like, give the huge, master's thesis lecture about self-ownership and non-aggression and all that fun stuff, if the person isn't ready to hear it, it's not going to do any good. If they're not already curious and interested, it's not going to do any good. So we need to think like salesmen, but not like pushy, obnoxious salesmen. Because and it's funny because this new approach seems to be like taking over the industry of sales, is if you actually have the approach of thinking, what is actually going to serve this person? Not what's going to trick them into doing what I want them to do, but what will actually make them happy. Like, if I'm selling some product, for decades, the whole thing was, how do I manipulate and deceive and, play with their emotions and fears and everything else to trick them into buying the crap that I'm selling for some corporation. Well, more recently, people have figured out, if your product isn't crap and you take the approach of, how will this actually help this person? And how do I best convey to them how this product might actually benefit them? Not how do I trick them into buying it so it benefits the person selling it, but how do I convince them to pay attention long enough for them to decide if it's something that they want. And most people are not very good at this. Most voluntarists are not very good at this because they believe something strongly and they just want to bludgeon people over the head with it because it's really important. Now, that's totally understandable. I'm not saying you're a bad person for doing that. I am saying it doesn't work very well. Like, having tried that for many years and slowly learned lots about psychology over the last 27 years of being an anarchist. Often, like, I've never heard of the gazillions of voluntarists and anarchists I've heard from, I've never heard anybody say, well, I was just minding my business, never thought about this stuff at all, and then my friend sat me down for 3 hours and talked to me, and I was convinced. I don't know anybody that is their story. Most people have some little event that made them go, that's a little bit weird, and then made them curious, so they wanted to dig farther. They wanted to dive down the proverbial rabbit hole. And so, as tempting as it may be for us to want to explain everything, it's far more useful to use little approaches that make other people want to figure it out. And one thing I really love about Jones Plantation, it doesn't, and this may sound weird, it doesn't tell people the solution. It doesn't describe voluntarism. It doesn't say anything about it. It doesn't say anything about how the world should be. Well, Samuel says a few things that you could say, yeah, his ideas are way better than theirs. But it isn't about showing how the world should be. It's about showing how the world is. Not in a good way. To get people to go, is that what's going on now? And to see through the tricks and to recognize how the tricks work. And it isn't because that brings them to the finish line. That just walks them up to the starting line and go, does this make you curious? Do you want to learn more about this? Do you want to think about this stuff? Are you wondering how much of this has been done in the real world? How much of these tricks that you see in this fictional story match what's actually been going on in the world for centuries? And I know that a bunch of normal people have had that response because I've seen them have that response in person, and I've heard their commentary when they're like, there's been a number of screenings, and when I'm at a screening, I'm not watching the movie. I'm mostly watching the audience to see what they're getting and to see their reactions and to see what triggers them, and then listening after the fact to conversations, whether they're talking to me or just people chatting on the side or whatever. And this was even true on set shooting the thing, where cast members and crew members would sort of go, oh, this is sort of like they'd have little discussions about what's happening in the movie that they're in the process of shooting. They're like, wow, this is like this. Well, does that mean? And that is the enticement. It's not the answer. We don't give them the punchline. We don't give them a sermon about here is how things should be. We give them a story that shows how things definitely should not be, but how things pretty much are to get their interest. And it's like, I can't emphasize enough how much I completely sympathize with wanting to tell people the punchline. I know. And like my book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, that is the punchline. But that's a fine example because I would rarely suggest that book to somebody who's shown no interest and who's just living their life. They pay no attention to politics. Probably don't start with that book because they're not going to want to read it because they don't care. They're not interested yet. And I mean, I'm sure everybody listening can think of examples in their own life. What are you interested in? Do you remember when you first got into it? Like, oh, I'm getting into bird watching and ornithology or learning about dinosaurs or learning physics or getting into math or traveling and learning about, whatever your interests are. And it doesn't have to be anything grandiose. Whatever your interests are, do you remember the point at which you're like, this is really cool. My brain likes to think about this and delve into this. Like, do you have any interest that was bludgeoned into your brain? Anything that you now care about and focus on that you didn't like, but somebody else like bullied you into liking it? That's not how people acquire curiosity and an interest in anything, by somebody else yelling at them until they do it. And I mean, how many fathers have learned this the hard way? Like, I'm going to teach you to play baseball. It's like, I don't want to play baseball. Or I'm going to teach you to go fishing. Like, if you try it out and they like it, cool. If they don't like it, bludgeoning them over the head with it isn't going to help. Like, they're going to have negative associations. And the thing is, a lot of people in the normal world have negative associations to literally freedom, because the people who believe in freedom often try to evangelize in a in-your-face yelling at people way. And I've done more than my fair share of that, so it's not plenty of criticism to go around. And I could totally relate and totally understand. But that isn't how you get somebody to want to know something or question something or think about something. Not even accept the punchline or accept the conclusion, but just sort of consider it. And sort of consider it to the point where they're curious to know what it actually is about anything. And so it's, I think one of the very unusual things about the Jones Plantation compared to most of what I do is that it says nothing about the solution. I mean, the most dangerous superstition, that explains the entire problem and solution. That's sort of my punchline. It's the most important thing I've ever written. But that's for people who already go, yeah, what is this about? Here you go. When you're curious, you're going to take the journey on your own. And other people can like supply you with resources and videos and articles and books and stuff to check out, which is fine. But at that point, it's your own curiosity dragging you along. It's not somebody else dragging you along into something you don't give a crap about or aren't at all curious or interested in. So it's funny to me that I think one of the most powerful things to get people headed in the direction of voluntarism doesn't say one word about voluntarism. It's not about that at all. It's about showing the alternative in all its ugly, anti-human, deceptive, psychotic reality, so that people go, yeah, this can't be what we're supposed to have. What else is there? Just to pique their curiosity to the point that they will take themselves on a journey. And again, it can be by way of resources that maybe you're going to give them. Well, here, you know, as soon as we can have that discussion, starting it, and they're curious and they're at least capable of talking about it, then, you know, everything's fair game. Show them whatever article and stuff you want and see what they'll bother to read or watch or whatever. But, and that's an important thing to mention too. It isn't that you have to get them to all the way completely agree with you on that first step. They may still be reluctant. In fact, almost everybody is. I totally was myself. When they start to consider something that doesn't match their paradigm and what they've always believed, the natural thing is for them to drag their feet, even to sort of an irrational degree. So it's not like, I couldn't drag them over the threshold to tell me I'm right. That doesn't matter. If you can get them to the point that they're capable of talking about it, just that, just capable of having a discussion, that is the first step. And I've seen a whole bunch of people, and it's funny because I know a number of people who've, and this goes back years, who they've been interested and we've started to talk. And I've done this with at least 3 or 4 different people. And I said, by the way, I'm just going to pause it right now and say, I bet anything that in a year you're a voluntarist. And at least 2 of them came back to me later and said, how did you were totally right. I was not at all a voluntarist at the time. I didn't agree with what you were saying. I thought you were delusional and wrong and maybe even crazy. Why did you just declare I was going to get there? And my answer is the same, because you were thinking about it. And getting people to the point that they're thinking about it, that is the entire challenge. Because once they're thinking about it, then it's a competition of ideas. And the idea of statism is profoundly idiotic. It doesn't make any sense. It's a blind faith cult belief in something that is logically ridiculous and morally insane, which is why it has to be bludgeoned through people's heads for them to ever accept it to begin with. But as soon as somebody gets to the point where they're daring to think about it and talk about it, like that's 99% of the challenge, is to get people to the point that they can talk about it. And so it isn't a matter of, I have to drag this person to the finish line. No, you have to point that person to the starting line and go, does that interest you? And maybe I'll show you a different way. And maybe this movie called Jones Plantation, maybe that'll interest you. Maybe this dumb little video, or like this animated video called The Philosophy of Liberty. Maybe that'll interest you. And I know a bunch of people. That video is freaking brilliant. Simple animation. There's literally no narration. It's all written in animation. I did a new soundtrack for it a number of years ago. I didn't make that video. Somebody else did. And it's freaking brilliant. And a number of people who watched it, including Amanda, watched it and went, whoa, I'm going to have to think about that, because that kind of flies in the face of everything we're taught, but it also seems so obvious and simple. but it's just to get them to look at the starting line and go, yeah, maybe I'll step over that starting line. And again, it can be different things for different people. And I know it's different things for different people. But if you're looking at the finish line, talking to somebody who hasn't walked up to the starting line yet, you're just going to be frustrated and probably accomplish nothing. But if you find something that will get them to choose to look at something and question something and go, yeah, that is sort of messed up, but what about, as soon as they're to the but what about stage, as in they're thinking about it but not sure what to make of this, or they're still sorting out concepts in their own head, that's all fine. They already crossed the starting line, and that is the biggest challenge. Now, I don't mean just abandon them as they're to the starting line. That's when you can have all sorts of fun discussions and stuff. But getting them there should be the focus of voluntarists. And I see so many voluntarists who write out these, even like comments on YouTube, where there's this huge master's thesis explaining everything they believe. Who do you think is reading that? Like, almost nobody. And of the very few people who read it, they're people who already agree with you. Like, nobody who doesn't care about that and has never thought about that is going to read your in-depth philosophical treatise. It doesn't matter how smart it was, how genius it was. If their curiosity and their interest doesn't make them want to look at it, you're not going to accomplish anything. And so it's, I can't emphasize enough. And it doesn't, you know, I've done lots of things and I'm pretty dang proud of them, like Jones Plantation, obviously being the recent one. And from silly little videos like I'm Allowed to Rob You and The Tiny Dot and If You Were King. And actually Jones Plantation, the original little animated thing I did a gazillion years ago. It Can't Happen Here. A billion little articles I've written. Like, there's lots of stuff I've done. There's also tons of stuff other people have done. It doesn't have to just be mine. Like the philosophy of liberty, and you can go back to Albert J. Nock, Our Enemy the State, although that's already at a level that somebody has to be a little bit interested to delve that much into it. Even The Story of Your Enslavement by Stefan Molyneux, before he wandered into nationalistic, statist, apologist weirdness. There's a ton of stuff out there that can catch people's interest, make you go, huh. One of them is Message to the Voting Cattle, which is actually, it's excerpts from my novel, The Iron Web, but somebody else, some voluntarists I know in Germany, put that together, and it sort of starts with just a slap in the face to people. Even that is, you know, blunt and kind of rude as that is, a lot of people said that started them on their journey doubting things. So it's very different for different people. But if you're looking at somebody who's here, like in the realm of they don't think about this stuff, they don't talk about this stuff, they live their life, they don't philosophize, they don't seem curious, they don't seem to doubt the mainstream, and then you're looking at the finish line of how am I ever going to get that person from where they are to like a fully informed voluntarist? You're not. And you don't have to. Show them the starting line. And if that doesn't work, if you can't get them interested in the starting line, go to somebody else. Because if they won't walk themselves up to the starting line with your help and you pointing at it, then go talk to somebody else. Because you can't force somebody to learn something that's already going to go against their paradigms and assumptions if they don't give a crap about it. It's, I mean, the cliche example, again, is like Jehovah's Witness. What does everybody think of? Oh, those annoying people trying to tell me what they believe. What's their success rate? Like 0, pretty much. Like they might occasionally have a fun discussion with somebody who's already Christian and already into that stuff, but like whoop-de-doo. They're not going to people's houses who are just random people who never believe that and talking them into it. They're just annoying the crap out of tons of people who don't care and don't want to listen and aren't at all interested. And it's kind of sad and frustrating to see how many voluntarists, their very well-intentioned efforts are, to a large degree, doing the same thing. You're trying to drag people to a finish line that they don't care about. They're not interested in. They're not interested in the whole race. Instead of going, here's the starting line. Here, look at the starting line. The starting line is called Jones Plantation, for example. And have them see it and see if they're up for a discussion. And to begin with, there's still this starting line. They're not going to come out of Jones Plantation and go, now I understand self-ownership and non-aggression and voluntarism, none of which are at all mentioned in the movie in any way, shape, or form. But they may start to go, yeah, the thing of democracy, that was kind of creepy, because to start their brain in the direction. So I would say, yes, I understand how Herculean a task it may seem to try to get a normal person to adopt voluntarism, but you don't really need to. You need to show them the starting line and see if you can catch their interest enough that they start it, because they will take themselves from there to there. I know thousands and thousands and thousands of people who have. One of them is me, where I was curious about stuff. And I didn't want to take that journey. My goal was not to get over to anarchism. That seemed weird and fringe and impossible and unrealistic and all sorts of stuff. But I made the mistake of wanting to think about things and think about principles and concepts and philosophy. And so that's where I ended up. Mostly under my own power. As in, and it's not that I wasn't like reading things from other people and talking to other people. It's not like I didn't have any input from other people. But as far as like I was self-propelled, as far as getting from there to there, it was my curiosity and interest that got me there. And I bet for the vast majority of you, it was your curiosity and interest that got you from there to here. And there are lots of different stories of what made people go, and step up to the starting line. And they're very different stories and they're very different things. Some of them have nothing to do with philosophy even. It's like learning how the Federal Reserve works. Well, that's not about philosophy or self-ownership. But that brought a lot of people to the starting line, and they finished at voluntarism because their brain got into it and they started thinking about it. So there's lots of ways to point people at the starting line. And mostly from then on, if you can get somebody to step over the starting line, they will mostly take themselves all the way to the finish line. You don't have to drag them the whole way. You may have to nudge them up to the starting line. And that's where something like Jones Plantation, and again, there's a million other things, but of course, that's the movie that came out. And I'm really dang happy about how it came out. That's why we're having screenings and stuff and pushing it all over the place. If you know other stuff to nudge people to the starting line, do the other stuff too. Like, whatever. But I think it's so easy for voluntarists to want to give up because they're like, the distance between where they are and what I wish they understood is huge. Yeah, I know. And you don't have to make them take that journey. They will take that journey on their own if you can nudge them up to the starting line. So anyway, I guess I've ranted about that about enough. So if you want to drag, if you're in the Pennsylvania area and you want to drag some people up to the starting line, the Jones Plantation seems to be doing a really dang good job of doing that for a lot of people, to start them thinking and questioning stuff and talking about stuff. And cool, now you're over the starting line and you're in the race. It isn't really a race. People can be as slow as they want. But just being able to get people capable of thinking about it and doubting things and seeing things through a different viewpoint, which I think Jones Plantation is going to do. It already has done it for a lot of people, and it's going to keep doing it for a lot of people, because it shows them a view of reality that no other movie is going to show them, but they will recognize the truth in it. Now, there's different layers. They're not going to recognize it all in one shot. There's some of it that's going to be really obvious, like while they're watching it. Other pieces of it may rattle around inside their head, and they may notice later on, hey, our currency, this is like the Jones Plantation credits. Do they really just make them up out of thin air? Whatever path they use on their journey, the starting line, the first step, is really all that you as a voluntarist need to focus on. Just getting them there. And they may ask you after that, well, what about this? And what about that? And where can I read more about this? And so on and so forth. But don't be discouraged by the length of the race, because you don't have to get them here. You only have to get them there. And there's lots of ways to do that. And I think Jones Plantation is an awesome way to do that, among other things you can do. And if you have other things, do the other things. But don't do nothing just because the finish line seems so far away. So I will see some of you in Oaks, Pennsylvania tomorrow night, day after tomorrow when I'm recording this, but by the time this is posted, tomorrow night, Saturday, movie starts at 6:30, December 16th, Saturday, that is. If you're seeing this video after this, whoops, you missed it. But there will also be the official premiere in Los Angeles on January 20th. So I'll see some of you there, and I really hope every time there's a screening or anytime anybody's watching it anywhere, I always hope there are some people there who haven't yet stepped across the starting line to see how it resonates with them and see what it makes them think about and doubt and talk about. And I've been pretty dang enthused watching a bunch of people's brains immediately get thrown into, hey, what about this? Well, does that mean, cool, they're over the starting line. Most of them are going to do the rest of the work themselves. You don't have to drag them to the end.